Fela passed on many years ago, but he gave himself immortality, and that's the reason his music remains relevant. Everything happening in our continent, everything happening in our country, the negative things, we will always remember that Fela preached against those things, sang songs against those things, suffered for complaining about those things. So let's give a round of applause to the organizers. It is my wish that 20 years down the line, these celebrations will continue in honor of one of Nigeria's few genuine heroes. The challenge that we have as a people is to ensure that we do not let the lights burn out. I'm confident that we'll be able to achieve that. Monday to Friday, I wake up thinking of what to say. Things that will make sense to the viewer. But I'm happy today that I'm not going to be one of these speakers. Talking about Africa and its leaders is an extremely sobering experience, because there are really success stories to talk about. Africa represents all the ugly distempers that make living decently impossible. And when we're talking about African leaders, you really have not so much to say apart from the good things that they used to do. So I'm happy. I won't have to talk about those guys. I'll just sit down and watch Fela, Eunice, Latin, and my fairy brother Sowore do all the talking. Maybe they will enjoy talking about those leaders. Because you look at the continent and you look at the United Nations Human Development Index, our continent is eminently in inverted commas represented. Year on year, we are represented in the most shameful manner. You look at a country like Niger Republic in 2015, out of 188 countries, Niger Republic placed 187 in the UN Human Development Index. It shows to you that apart from the fact that geography has not been particularly very good to Niger Republic, because 80% of its land mass is actually covered by the Sahara. But successive leaders have not done much to change the narrative, to make that country better. Niger Republic is today a failed state. And one reason Nigeria has not been able to defeat Boko Haram is because of Niger Republic. Because Boko Haram has active cells inside Niger Republic. So when Nigerian troops are chasing them, they go into Niger Republic and they hide. Once they get inside the Niger Republic, there's nothing you can do to them. And I can explain this by just one illustration. The local governments where Boko Haram still remains active in Nigeria are those local governments that border Niger Republic. Abadan, Mati, and Moba in Borno State. Of course, they will tell you that Boko Haram does not occupy any Nigerian territory. As I always say on the program, it is a lie from the pit of hell. we have a big problem on our hands. How do we defeat those monsters? We can only defeat those monsters if the countries around us, where they continue to find refuge, cooperate fully. So I hope that in the fullness of time, leadership will improve across the continent. Improve, especially in the Niger Republic, so that my own country can benefit from improvements in the quality of leadership in that country. Everyone talks about Rwanda now. Many years back, Rwanda was written off as a country. My admonition to everyone here is that we should not write Africa off. Let's continue to have hope that time will come when Africa will have the right kind of leaders that can make a difference, leaders that can make good things happen. For now, we don't have them, whether in Nigeria or anywhere. We simply don't have those leaders, except we want to make a career out of deceiving ourselves. We don't have those good leaders, but we won't give up. And I'm sure that our panelists today will be doing justice to this unusual topic about an unusual continent. Thank you for coming. Let me invite our first speaker, the inimitable, eloquent, brilliant, and one of the brightest of his generation, Mr. Fela Kuti.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'm sure if I shouted, take it back, then there will be more noise here. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I really want to say today is a very special day, and special on many counts for me and for even the continent of Africa. First, let me start by saying a big thank you to the organizers of Felabration and for keeping up this great work and for getting it better and brighter and bigger every year. So if you don't mind, I'll ask you to please put your hands together for me. And whilst we celebrate the 80th birthday posthumously of this great icon, this piece of amazingness that we all have come to know and love. Some of us may have learned about him just by reading, but some of us had the good fortune of really knowing him, meeting him personally, and in my own case, at the age of 12, sharing a stage with him at the Odigua Hall of the Obafemi Awolowo University in 1983. Great event!
Great!
At that time, I was a young boy, 12 years old, leading a musical youth band called Midwaves. And in one of the shows where we were performing, the great Fela was also performing. And because my father was schoolmates and classmates with Fela in Abeokuta Grammar School, and at their first time when they set up a band together, and my father was the guitarist, and they would skip from the stories, they would skip the fence and go into town in the evenings. So when my manager at that time, Babayemi Thompson, heard the story of how the fact that my father and Fela were very close friends, he decided to take me to Fela, and of course, at the mention of my father's name, you know, the great icon, the great legend stood up, hugged me, and just chatted briefly with me, but it felt like I was there forever. So today is a special day for me to be here at Felabration. It's my first time of being here. But today is also a very special day for Africa. Because 73 years ago, on this very same day, October 15, in a little hotel in Manchester, 90 young men and women gathered together in that hotel, and they were there for about 6 days, between the 15th of October and the 21st of October. And nothing really much was written about that particular meeting, but it was a meeting that was going to change the world, at least for Africa, the way that they knew it. At that meeting, there were people like Kwame Nkrumah. There were people like Kamuzu Banda, Hastings Banda, before he changed his name to Kamuzu Banda. There were people like Jomo Kenyatta, who were in that room. And of course, there were people like Obafemi Awolowo, who were also at what was called the 5th Pan-African Congress. And it was the 5th Pan-African Congress that history bears as the core trigger, where 90 young people decided that it was time for them to take back their future from the hands of colonialists who had made them second-class citizens in their own countries. And even though the meeting was happening in Manchester, United Kingdom, because the colonialists took them for granted, I guess in the words of Sowore, they called them inconsequential. And so, at one point or the other, they didn't even do anything about it until it was literally too late. 15 years later, or 24 of the African countries had already positioned, and many of them had already entered into independence based on one meeting that took place 73 years ago. So, if you look at it, in 1945, when that meeting took place, Obafemi Awolowo, who was born in 1909, was 36 years old. Kwame Nkrumah, who was also born in 1909, was also 36 years old. These were the guys who were taking a decision for their continent. These were the guys who were challenging the status quo. They didn't have money, they didn't have pedigree, they barely had an education. I mean, Obafemi Awolowo literally had just graduated, I believe, in 1944 from law. So this was fresh graduates. If there was NYSC in the United Kingdom, he would have been an NYSC, he would have been a youth corps at the age of 36. But we must remember they were young, and they were visionary, and they had no prior experience in governance, but they had a vision. They had an idea that their country was better than it was the way that they had been born into it. That their people deserved better than being second-class citizens in their own nation. And they had come to a common understanding that they were a generation that was born for liberation. They had come to a common understanding that they were a generation that had the divine mandate to liberate their own people and to give freedom to their children. And they worked hard at it. They worked across board. They were united across tribe, they were united across religion, they were united across social barriers. They came together within their countries, and even then, even when one of them or the other would get independence, they would not stop until all of them got independence. Because they understood the power of unity in overcoming every great challenge. And so for Nigeria, the success story was that on Saturday, the 1st of October, 1960, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, stood on the podium and read his independence speech as the first Prime Minister of the Federation of Nigeria. Now you must remember that Abubakar Tafawa Balewa himself was born in 1912. So as at when he was reading the speech as the leader of Nigeria, he was 48 years old. That is how old I will be next year when I'm reading my presidential inauguration speech. So a 48-year-old man was okay to lead Nigeria. And for those of you who would please Google it if you haven't already seen it, I think one of the most important things that we can ever watch is a USIS video of a visit of Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa to the United States on July 25, 1961, barely 9 months after he read his Independence Day speech. And when you watch that video, there are many emotions that will well up in you, because essentially you would see how America and Americans came out to honor a man and his team who couldn't even afford to fly in on their own country's presidential jets. And whilst Abubakar Tafawa Balewa and his entourage flew in on the presidential jet of the United States of America, they were met at the airport by the Vice President, Lyndon Johnson. They were met by the Secretary of State and a delegation of great statesmen from the United States. These were the people who were meeting young men under the age of 50. And why did they treat us with so much pomp and pageantry? Because they were looking at these young men and they could see hope. Not only hope for a nation, but hope for a continent. They didn't see a rich country. Our first oil well, as many of you know, was drilled in 1959. This was barely a year and a half after the first oil well was drilled. They didn't see an oil-rich country. They just saw a nation reflecting a continent where young people had decided to take their future in their own hands and were able to organize themselves in unity across everything that the colonialists had used to divide them and rule them. And they were able to come together and overcome and achieve their goal. And that was what the world was celebrating. The world had great hopes for Nigeria. The world had great hopes for Africa. And many of you know, over time, those hopes have been dashed. Those hopes are almost being buried, not just by the world, but even by the people of Africa ourselves. So sometime in the course, less than 4 years or so after, a group of military boys decided to overtake. And the interesting thing is that since they overtook, they can't block the road so that nobody will come to overtake them. But a new generation has come to overtake the overtakers. Some of those who are still alive today include General Gowon from that particular generation, who took over the reins of power at the age of 31. And under his own watch, on the 24th of March, 1971, the year that I was born, 1 Nigerian pound exchanged for $3 US. So if you took 100 Nigerian pounds to the Bureau de Change, you will get 300 United States dollars for 100 Nigerian pounds. By the name of Olusegun Obasanjo, under circumstances obviously not very pleasant at that time, reins of power, and he took over 2 weeks before his 39th birthday. So Obasanjo was 38 years old when he became head of state. 2 weeks later, he became 39. And at the year that Obasanjo took over, 1976, on the same day as I just quoted to you, March 24, 1 Nigerian naira was exchanging for $1.33. Meaning that if you took 1 naira to the bureau de change, you would get 133 US dollars. And then over time, Obasanjo handed over. And then the military took over again. And at one point in time, our current president, then General Muhammadu Buhari, took over on the 31st of December 1983, 2 weeks after his own 41st birthday. So by the time General Buhari took over the reins of power in Nigeria, I today am 47 years old. That is, I'm 6 years older than Buhari when he took over as head of state. Of course, that came in 1999, and Obasanjo was there till 2007. In 2006, on the same day, March 24, this is 30 years after Obasanjo's first experience as head of state. Remember what I said to you. In 1976, March 24, whilst Obasanjo was head of state, 1 naira was $1.33. By 2006, now Obasanjo being president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, on the same day, $1 is now exchanging for 133 naira. Meaning that as Obasanjo grew older, okay, not maybe but as the leadership of Nigeria grew older, our currency grew weaker. So perhaps it will come to a point in time when we will be able to reverse the trend concerning the strength of our currency as we fix our economy, when younger people will once again take the reins and the statesmanship of this country, and we would lead Nigeria to our glory times again. But because these ones that have become older have refused to step aside, they will need to be overtaken. But they will need to be overtaken by a generation because they didn't come in as one, they came in as a generation. So it will not be one Eunice or one Fela or one Sowore that will be able to get this thing done. It's going to be a collaboration of Eunice and Fela and Sowore to bring to pass the kind of thing that we need to do. So I serve notice to the older generation. This generation have refused to learn, and teacher, please don't come and teach us nonsense. Because we cannot learn democracy from those who do not know democracy. Oh yes. So I bring my thoughts towards the close. All across Africa, God has blessed a continent just beyond description. There are many studies that have shown that the resources that are required by the world to survive in the 21st century, 60% or so of those resources actually lie in the continent of Africa. We know that Nigeria is a specially blessed nation with mineral resources, natural resources, and human resources. But we have not been able to live out the fullness of our potential for a very simple reason. We have not really experienced leadership. We have experienced rulership, but not leadership. Because what rulers do is rulers amass subjects, but leaders inspire followers. their subjects, but leaders impress their followers and release them to do great things. And so whilst we have been subject to military rule for much of the last 54 or so, or 50-something years, we have to understand that the time has come when military rule must step aside, whether in military uniform or civilian garment, but military rule must step aside for a new generation of people, great leaders, to take over. Now let me quickly say something as I close. That there are certain cycles that you cannot explain. But for those who are very spiritual in nature, they would say things like time and chance happen to them. So on December 12, 1959, Nigeria had its first general elections that produced eventually the government that led Nigeria on October 1st, 1960. But it was December 1st to December 12, 1959 that those general elections took place. 20 years after, in 1979, there was another shift. This time from military rule to civilian rule. And 20 years after, in 1999, there was another election. And another shift. This time from military rule to military ruler in civilian clothes. So 20 years after the first election, there was a shift. 20 years after that, there was another shift. Well, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as I bring my thoughts to a close, I want to remind you, 20 years after 1999 is 2019. And there will be another shift. This time from military rulers in civilian clothes to truly democratic civilians who will lead Nigeria back to the path of greatness. I believe that it will take a generational collaboration. It will not just be a collaboration amongst candidates and aspirants, it will be a collaboration amongst the people. It will be a generation of people who refuse to be divided by party, who refuse to be divided, and who refuse to fight themselves. It will be a generation of people who will clap for everyone that represents their generation, regardless of whether they are in their party or not. Some people have been tackling me and saying, why is it that you are always celebrating other people? Well, Sowore has celebrated me. Why should I not celebrate Sowore? Eunice Atejude has celebrated me. Why should I not celebrate her? We need to help this older generation know that the time of old, bitter competition amongst rivals is over. It is now time for better collaboration. Amongst the generation. The greatness of Nigeria is at hand, and it will emerge. And I want to congratulate all of you who are here today. And I pray that you would live to see Nigeria, the greatness of Nigeria will come back again, so that everything that Fela fought against will become not just a song, but an experience. And I said I was going to do something. So you permit me, I wanted to do it for a long time. And it is to do something that I did many years ago, and to sing a little part of Fela's songs. So if you know it, you will sing it with me, and then I will hand over the microphone. All the wahala, all the problems, all the things where the things say who do for this world it starts. When the teacher, schoolboy and schoolgirl jam together. Who be teacher? I go let you know. Who be teacher? I go let you know. When we be picking, when we dey for school, when we dey in university, when we start to walk, government be teacher.
Went down memory lane to let us know that our human and all those Pan-Africanists that will remember fondly were in their 30s when they seized the continent and liberated their countries. So those who would want us to believe that an Aminu Waziri Tambuwal at 52 years is too young, they need to have their heads scrambled and reset to factory setting. Because it is only in our country that people who reason in this manner. A 52-year-old man too young to lead this country? How old is Macron? Everyone appears to be living Nigeria behind. The world is going back to electing young leaders. But for some of us, including shamefully the young people, we think our salvation lies in antiquated humans walking the face of the earth. You know why I call them antiquated? Because their ideas have no place in today's world. The ideas are old and have no place in today's world. And that's the message that Fela Kuti eloquently brought to us today. But I want to remind you that we should not just listen and clap. We should invite the message. And I've always said that young people have a weapon that they refuse to use. You have the weapon. There are more younger people in Nigeria than old people. There are more young people in Nigeria than old people. If we would take politics seriously, if we would not just busy ourselves, just listening to music, watching telenovelas, if we would take seriously the matter of our state, if we take seriously getting our BBCs and taking an active part in determining those who will rule us, honestly, young leaders will emerge in our country. Maybe you think I can't, but it will happen. Women, for example, you know that in Kano, a woman won direct primaries to the House of Reps. Women have been repressed over the years in the north, not allowed to offer themselves to be voted for. But the day women unite, because they are easier to mobilize on election day than men, the day women unite that they want to rule the country, honestly, they have the voting right. All of these people that we routinely elect who go there simply to turn Nigeria to a buffet. I'm telling you that that time will come when they will be replaced by the right people. I know some of us are not religious, so I can't hear amen. It's not loud. So, one takeaway from this paper presented by Fela Kuti is the need for generational collaboration. As a people, we need to collaborate. As a generation, we need to collaborate. I'll be more excited if a young man like Fela leads my country. I'll be very proud. Wherever he speaks, I will say, yes, this is my leader. A leader that I can be proud of. You see now when Uhuru Kenyatta, when he begins to speak, you see the pride with which Kenyans listen. That's the way it should be. And Nigeria is not in short of the bright people who can truly make us proud, provide the right leadership, lead us competently. I'm confident that we will get there one day. But we must work hard. So I want to bring on the representative of OBA Executive President, Mr. Tudilan.
Today, saying that she will not be able to attend and I should step in for her. And so I hastily presented preparations, but I'm here. But I think also destiny has a hand in ensuring that I'm here. This is one of those happenstance where you could not have planned it. Here I am celebrating Fela, and anybody who understands and knows my own history with Fela. Okay, so thank you. Is this better now? All right, in that case, everybody say yeah, yeah. Everybody say yeah, yeah. And as a nod to my brother there, very grudgingly, I come a very long way with Fela, and I don't want to start talking about my own history with Fela. Everybody has their own notional narratives about it. But suffice to say that Fela rented my father's nightclub, Afro Sport, and this is 30-40 years ago. So I grew up listening to Fela and really being indoctrinated by Fela. So like I was saying, my own presentation here is basically my own summation of the theme for today, which is African leadership in the millennium. And I know it's not a poor substitute because you're all waiting for Obi. And of course, how do you top Fela's rousing presentation? But I think there's something valid that I might want to contribute to this conversation here. I'm particularly pleased that he picked up on the sub-theme of overtake, trying to overtake. And the question now becomes, within the context of Africa, leadership, millennium, how can we overtake this generation? That's one question I'm going to leave hanging out there. The other thing that is also clear is that even as we speak about Africa, there's a slight nod and deference to Nigeria, basically, because as the organizer has mentioned, this is an election year. Oftentimes, in the public discourse space, we wonder if Africa is indeed a country or a continent. Oftentimes, when we're reading the critique of the West, we all homogenize into one unit called Africa as if there are no points of differentiation. And so sometimes we fight that Africa is not a country, as the West would like us to believe, that Africa is indeed a continent with varied interests, varied history, but a collective sense of destiny. So by turns, Africa can both be a country and a continent. And it's within these two framings that I would direct my presentation. Obviously talking about Africa as a continent, but also more importantly talking about Africa represented by Nigeria as a country. So the question of leadership is basically at the heart of this now, as we enter the 21st century. There are some statistics I gleaned, this morning, as a matter of fact, that I thought would provide some kind of a statistical background as to what it is we are challenged with. Because you can't solve problems if you cannot measure them. In March this year, in Rwanda, there was the emergence of what is called the Africa Single Market. That finally, after Kwame Nkrumah in 1957 said Africa must unite, after Fela sang about African unity, there is actually the basis for a formalized single market for the continent. And that is a very big plus. It's taken us from 1960 to 2018, 58 years, to get to a point where we realize that our strengths actually lie together. We're stronger together as Africans. The other thing that comes out of that is the statistics that shows that there's a growing African middle class. By some estimates, by 2030, there'll be 500 million Africans with about $2 trillion worth of spending power. And 2030 is just what? Another 10 years barely? So there's something to be said about, in spite of the negative outliers of governance, and the dinosaurs my friend was referring to, places like Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, Uganda, and I'm going to go back to Uganda for one particular point I want to make. Africa is actually moving quantitatively in terms of the economics of it, but it's an uneven development. In terms of demographics, it is expected that by 2030, there will be 320 million Africans, young Africans within the age group of, I think, 15 to 24. So Africa is resourced on multiple levels. Somebody mentioned that Africa has perhaps 60% of the global resources that will be needed to power the entire planet in this new millennium. Africa also has, perhaps also in the same parity, 60% of the youthful population, the human capital that is essential, that is really at the core of our own value proposition on this global world space. So Africa is a very young continent in spite of the predations of these dinosaurs. And it's important for us to realize that we do have a future both in material resources, but more importantly, in the human resources. The question now becomes, how do we harness both? Those are the challenges of leadership in the new millennium. And it might not be very clear as we ponder our own state of affairs, with Africa, quote unquote, being a country / Nigeria, where we're going in that. It's instrumental that at this point, in a country where the median age, I think, is 17, the two top political parties are fielding candidates in their 70s. What we have to understand is step back and look at it again. What we're witnessing is the end of a cycle. What we're witnessing is the end of a cycle. My own phrasing is the class of 66, the guys who took over, but basically created what I call the military political complex, in which they created a system in which they've captured the state from 1966 there on, with the active conspiracy of politicians, ethnicists, and generally a ruling class that is predatory, venal, corrupt, all the wonderful names you can call them. But they sit on top of Nigeria's future. They're a very small sliver of people, perhaps no more than 2 million people, who have access to 80% of the resources. So these are kind of the bare bones facts that we're contending with. I also want to talk about human resources as a counter to this narrative of oil. It is not about oil anymore. The value of oil percentage of our GDP has diminished over the last, I think last quarter is about 8.2%. So oil itself is not really where our wealth is. It's in the formal sector, in the growing informal sector, in farming, agriculture, in small services, the mom and pop shop, the woman who sells akara. Those are the people that constitute the backbone of the engine of growth in Nigeria. The other major chunk is the Nigerian diaspora. All the repatriees, all the Nigerians overseas who send in at least, I think by last account, $25 billion a year, coming from Nigerians living in the diaspora. So we have to step back and look at it and challenge the dominant narrative that oil is everything. No, oil is what services the graft machine, which is the Nigerian state. And that oil is what services the 2 million people that are fighting for political power, who form the ruling elite. What our political presidential candidates are fighting for now is how do we wrest control of the state, because it has been captured thoroughly, both at the sub-national levels in the state governments and at the very national level at the federal government. And those are the large existential challenges that we have to consider as we consider the issue of leadership. the thing about the future of Africa's leadership is that it is anchored on 2 or 3 things. One I would like to share with you is, again, going back to the demographics. Nigeria's demographics is just atrocious. I think there was a report that now says it's widely circulated that I think about 87 million people living in destitution. How can a country be so rich and yet so poor? Nigeria is a rich country full of poor people. That paradox is what we have to challenge. And those are the challenges before my presidential aspirants here now. Those are the real issues. The real issues is not whether Atiku can visit the US or whether Buhari has 150 cows or not. And this is where this very wily group of people have misdirected us. It's almost like one of those Professor Fela tricks. The more you look, the less you see. Glory changer, Babari changer. They've shifted attention from what is the core challenge of this country. How do we take care of these young people? How can we have a country where 10.4 million children are out of school? It's unconscionable. I mean, I can't say this thing without my eyes welling up. I cannot honestly, because it's an emotion. It's an emotional issue for me. Because you see your country as if you're watching a movie of a train in a train wreck in slow motion. That's what it is like. We're seeing it going over the cliff and we're all shouting, no, don't do that. But somehow, nothing happens. Why? Because the people who are being wrecked, young people, seem curiously indifferent. I had a sidebar conversation with Fela, and he pointed out something that was very useful for me. I said, when are young Nigerians going to come to terms with the fact that on the basis of their own enlightened self-interest, they have to capture back the state through political participation, through the nomination and the support of candidates like this? He says, well, for you to have enlightened self-interest, you first have to be enlightened. So the question now is, where do we start? It's a chicken and an egg situation. We're rapidly going over the cliff with a whole horde of young people who are quote-unquote not enlightened. And it was deliberate. I mean, I have a historical sense of Nigeria. I've been writing about Nigeria for 40 years. So I understand it from a purely experiential historical perspective. Writing around the military as a young person, getting into trouble, getting arrested, almost being killed. We have the credentialing there, but we never anticipated it was get to a point where we have literally 87 million people poor. 120 million Nigerians are under the age of 35. So you have this vast army of young people. And where and how do we switch? What will turn that switch? I think that the key challenge for us here is really not to worry about the technical things. That's what they're throwing about us. I mean, so I'm going to build you 10,000 kilometers of roads. I'm going to do this. That's not Nigeria's problem. Nigeria's problem is not technical. Nigeria's problem is adaptive. Nigeria's problem is not technical, it's not technology per se. It is psychology. So the question now is, how can we reset the mindset of Nigerians, especially young Nigerians, to the point where they can overtake this present narrative and create their own narrative? In many talks, I usually talk to young people. I always try to introduce time as a concept to them. Like, okay, we're looking at it within a space-time continuum. The past we know already. The present is fleeting. The moment you say present, it becomes the past. But the future is what the philosophers call a tabula rasa. It's a blank slate. So the future of Nigeria is yet to be written. It is not a fait accompli that either Buhari, Atiku, or whoever those people from the class of 66 represent are going to be the president of Nigeria next year. Because it's the future, and the future is yet to be written. The question is, how can we harness the power of young people to make enlightened choices to change this prevalent narrative? That's one challenge. The second challenge is, how do we expunge the culture of militarization in our mindset? We who grow up under the military and under the military understand that. But to see it manifest in a generation that had no direct contact with the military is frightening to us. How do you change and switch that mindset? One way you can do that is, as young people often tell me, is technology. I think technology might be one of the ways in which you can overtake. And, you know, by all estimates, I did some work last year, and the statistics were that by NCC, that 90 million plus Nigerians use the internet one way or the other. Mobile transfers, you know, young people are using it. And that Facebook has about 26 million and growing Nigerians. Well, 26 million people on Facebook as a community is larger than the next 3 countries beside Nigeria, Togo, Benin. So my own thing is, how can we use that part of technology? Because technology is going to be an intrinsic part of Africa's growth over the next millennium. Because you're talking about a young population who are all wired. Presently, across Africa, I think internet penetration is about 20%. It's probably going to grow with the low cost of data. So the question now becomes, if you have 26 million people on Facebook, that is a virtual country. So I want us to just expand the prospects, you know, and move beyond, as Fela would say, this goddamn contraption, and get into the underground spiritual game. But the underground spiritual game here now is technology. How can we look at Africa differently? How can we harness the resources of young Africans? And I'm saying that within the context of Africa being a continent and Africa being a country as in Nigeria. How can we create the virtual republic of Nigeria, where all the ideas that we have can be debated, all the prospects, our dreams, our aspirations can be contested, and how can we use these tools to shape an alternative narrative for where we're going? Those are the challenges, I think. And I'm going to wind up by 3 minutes. I'm going to wind up by suggesting that we go back to the master of all of this. One of my favorite Fela stories, and a couple of them, was many years ago in the US. A group of us went to visit Professor Chinua Achebe when he was at Bard College. It was just shortly after his accident. So we drove up the Hudson River, went to Bard College, and were ushered into Prof's house, which had been modified to allow his wheelchair. And there he was sitting in his living room on his wheelchair with his black, tank top, and then his black beret, waiting for us. In the background was Fela's music just blasting away constantly. So I could not reconcile Professor Chinua Achebe with Fela. It was just one of those crazy mind-altering experiences. So I asked Prof, why are you listening to Fela? The guy, you know, is a very profound man. He picks his words. He said, why am I listening to Fela? He said, Fela is the sage of our times. Fela is, this is over 20 years ago. And this is what young people are rediscovering. Before I leave, I'm going to offer some kind of a discography. If you really want to understand Nigeria's problem and Africa's problem, I suggest you do a couple of things. Forget Afrobeats. Go back to the authentic Afrobeat as represented by this gentleman. I'm looking at Overtake, the logo. For those of you who are science inclined, of infinity. That is infinity. That is Fela. His music can never die. Let me offer a discography for you guys, you young people who think that Afrobeat is a thing. Go back to the underground spiritual sound of Fela. And I'm offering a couple of tunes for you. One thing you have to watch is the documentary music is a weapon. You have to watch that documentary to really understand that music is a weapon. I mentioned Uganda a while ago. If you ever have any doubts that music is a weapon, check out Bobby Wine in Uganda. If you ever had any doubts about the influence of Fela's prophecies as the sage of a time, talking about music being the weapon, go to Uganda and see what another musician is doing in Uganda, a young person trying to change things. You guys might want to borrow a leaf from him too, Bobby Wine. I think there are about 4 ones that just came out of my mind, tunes. You have to listen to Why Black Man They Suffer. I hope you're taking notes. This is not assurance. Suffering and Smiling, Water No Get Enemy, and Africa Center of the World. Thank you very much.
Way taller than myself. Every time Fuji talked about Uganda, my mind went straight to the president of Uganda. In 1992, having just finished youth service, I was on internship at Democrats newspapers. By the way, Democrats issue. And African leaders came to Abuja for a meeting. The president of Uganda was then interviewed. They wanted them to talk about the seat-tightism, the seat-tight syndrome, for which African leaders are ill reputed. And Museveni said, any leader who spends more than 10 years in office must have overstayed his welcome. He's been in office for 32 years. He's been in office for 32 years. So this is one of the problems we have with African leaders. They don't know when to quit. But as all the speakers have said here, the young people need to come together. Never believe that it is impossible. I was with the president's wife recently, and she was telling me the progress being made, trying to get women to get more involved in the electoral process. And during these last primary elections in Adamawa State, out of 3 senatorial seats, women won 2 out of the 3. So it is possible. Those things that you think, over the years, nobody could do it. It is possible to do those things now. But we have to be resolute, we have to be determined. If young people want to seize power, we must take the matter of seizing power seriously. I agree that the 1966 generation is a passing phase, and we have to do our best to lead them out through the door so that a new generation of committed leadership can take over the African political landscape. This is my wish. I'm sure it's the wish of the majority of us here. So, I want to bring on a very resourceful woman, a lawyer who has practiced in Europe and our country, a true pride of the Nigerian woman. So, put your hands together as I invite you.
you. I just said somebody called me after Fela because wow. I'm competing against this guy to be president. That's some serious something. Anyway, I had a very different take on leadership issues and presidency in Nigeria and leadership problems in the millennium in Africa. I hope people will not take off my head by the time this is done, but I'll tell you my position. So, I'm looking at this from the young people's perspective because
Shura is speaking after Eunice. Is the only speaker left.
To run for the presidency in Nigeria. So I have a slightly different view. When I look around at how African leaders hang on to power, I actually thank God that we don't have that problem in Nigeria. Why? We have never had a president or head of state or anything in Nigeria that lasted beyond those 10 years you spoke of. And that's because the people take leadership issues very seriously in Nigeria. So we have to learn to appreciate what we have and then build on those things to get what we don't have. So when we disregard people like Eduardo dos Santos, the former president Angola who just left last year, and Mugabe, who also left last year, we still have the number one, like we are still 7
Exactly, Ajay.
top 10 longest 7 presidents in Africa. And guess what? These countries where these guys are serving are the least productive, least successful, least peaceful. They're at the bottom of the pile in every sense you can think of. That tells us that staying long in office is more a problem for the country than what we have in Nigeria, which is like, when we tire for you, we send you packing. So, Canada, for example, has Obia, who is doing like 43 years or so. He's done 6 years as prime minister before he became president. They are suffering. Equatorial Guinea has Theodoro Mbasogo. It's very hard for me to pronounce their names. Most of these people are in their 70s and 80s, and he's been sitting there for 38 years. Equatorial Guinea has oil, but they are suffering. Republic of Congo, Denis Nguesso, he's been sitting there now for 38 years too. They are suffering. Uganda, my friend's place, where he's praising them, they are actually suffering. And the man, when he came indeed to Nigeria, I was very young, but I remember my dad talking about it, that any African leader who stays more than 10 years is wicked. Now he's 22 years and he's not even ready to go yet Ugandans are suffering. Sudan, Eritrea, Chad, everywhere you look, where these guys are sitting down as if it's their own birthright to hold power and do with it whatever they want, their people are suffering. But we don't have that problem in Nigeria. So again, we have a lot to be grateful for. Let me quickly touch on Rwanda. Rwanda has Kagame, who is there now 18 years. And he came from the military rule. Most times these men come as the saviors. They go against the establishments, they get rid of them. But after they get rid of them, they sit there and they forget that they got the people to come together, work with them for that vision of getting rid of these old guys, these wicked guys. These guys are not letting them live the life they deserve to live. They help them, they get rid of these people, they install these new leaders, these saviors, and then they start suffering. Rwanda, 18 years of Paul Kagame's rule, it's still going well. He started as the military, fight them all, Tutsi, Hutu, they are killing those things, and he was quite mean in a lot of ways, but he's been president of Rwanda for a while now, and I would say he's doing quite well. But this is still 18 years, and he already changed the laws, the constitutional laws, to allow him another 15 to 17 more years. So he's highly likely to spend 32, 38, 40 years in power. And what I envisage is that they will go from this beautiful Rwanda that is working so well to another country where they are suffering. Let's bring it home to Nigeria, because that's where we all end up. We are very lucky. We are very lucky because for whatever reason, all our differences, all our wickedness, we manage to work it out so that nobody at all can make us suffer for too long. We get rid of them somehow. And that is good. And that's where we need to build from. When Obasanjo first became head of state, he was 38, 39, I actually thought, but from what Laboratory said, he was actually just 38 going to be 39 as head of state, uniform, military.
Difference, no vex now.
He came back. When he came back, he was 62 as the civilian president. We didn't suffer too much. We suffered, but it wasn't too much. It wasn't the worst of all the leaders we had when he came back as a civilian. Then he left, and Yar'Adua took over. Yar'Adua was 56. Yar'Adua would have done well, I think, but he was too sick to do anything, so he died too soon. And then Goodluck Jonathan took over, he was 53. So we've gone 62, we've gone 56, we've come down to 53, and that 53 is still younger than some of us who are claiming youth, trying to remove them. Jonathan didn't do too well, but he is definitely nowhere near as bad as what we have today. What we have today, in my opinion, is the worst we will ever have. It's the worst we have ever had, and it is the worst we will ever have.
Yes, sir.
We will not take it. Nigerians do not take it.
Thanks,
when you
Oprah.
come in and you do not perform for some reason, the people who designed our laws designed them so well that you cannot entrench yourself. Abacha couldn't do it. Buhari cannot do it. We will remove him. But what I want us to understand is that it's not about just removing Buhari and replacing with young or new faces. It is very, very important that we think about the quality of these new faces, of these new, younger generation leadership we are wanting to replace Buhari with. It is so much more important to pick right than to pick young or new. That's where I came in. I'm running for office, but I'm not saying pick Eunice because she's a young woman or new. I'm saying go beyond what you're hearing me say. Don't just listen to all the things that I copy from all the other people and paste together and come and gist to you. Don't just look at all the activism and all the boldness that you see, because all these men and women who came in at the ages of 35 to 45, none of them came in at 80, apart from the Nigerian ones. All these people whose citizens are dying and suffering came in at the ages of 35 to 40, and they sat there. And if we make the mistake of picking people who do not care actually about the processes, about democracy, about the personalities, about the promises that they make to us while they stand on the podium. If we pick people who just say things because they have heard others say them, we will put people back there who will be worse than our current president. It's not about age at all. I am the founder and the national chairman of the National Interest Party, and most of us are under 40 at NIP. However, we know that amongst those of us, even in that age, we have some evil people. And it's the same in every institution. Amongst all of us running for office of president under the age of 50 or 60 or 40 or 30 even, we have some evil people. You need to see beyond what we are telling you. You need to look at the processes we use in emerging leaders, in our private businesses, how we relate with you in the public, how we treat our staff, how we take seriously the promises we make to you every day. What kind of lives have you caught us in? What kind of lives do we lead away from the cameras? If you can get behind the cameras, do so. Do so because that is the only way you see the true pictures. And you have to see the true pictures to pick the true leaders, the true lovers of Nigeria, the ones that will fight for you no matter what. It has nothing to do with age. It has everything to do with character, integrity, sincerity, honesty. I have no problem having a 120-year-old man or woman leading me, provided the person is sincere, honest, open, can carry us along, and let us understand everything they are doing for us, or some of the things that they have to do against us, just to keep everything together. As long as we are part of the process, as long as we are contributing our quota from every part of this country, and we have the right people who are thinking about us, each time they make decisions for this country, they make it thinking about every unit, we will be fine. It has absolutely nothing to do with age. It has absolutely nothing to do with tribe, religion, and all the other differences they try to tell us is the reason we are not functioning together. We can't function together, and we will function together provided those of us who have the opportunity to make the choices, make the right choices. We can do better as Africans, we can do better as Nigerians, but better is not necessarily younger. Thank you.
Message is clear. It's not about the age.
Share, guys. Let everybody come online. Share.
KTU 459 BS.
Brian, what is it?
But you will need to still move your car. So our message is clear. It's not about the age. You can actually find incompetent people amongst young people. So she wants us to make the right choices, informed choices, and our age may not necessarily, the young people may not necessarily give us the kind of leadership that we want. I wish you can give us, at least on the continent, many examples of old people who we can actually describe as wonderful leaders. A preponderance of bad leaders in Africa are actually very old. That's why it's no surprise that everyone thinks that that generational shift has to happen. I agree that we have to look at character and integrity. But it is my considered opinion that even if we are looking for people of tremendous character, people who have integrity, we can find them amongst young people. So,
Yes, Kemilola, that's why I asked you to share. Show is the only person left to talk.
And one of Africa's
Share. Eunice has finished speaking.
greatest 6 tight leaders of all time, the former president of Zimbabwe, was in South Africa, and a journalist from Uganda walked up to him and asked the question, Mr. President, when are you going to bid the Ugandan people goodbye? And his answer was, where are they going?
Don't tune off, Kemi. It's going to introduce show. Please share, let people join. Share, guys. Share, keep sharing, keep sharing.
Beat the Ugandan people goodbye. I mean, the Zimbabwean people goodbye. Where are they going? That was in 2006. After 2006, you know how many more years that Mugabe still remained president?
Keep sharing, guys. Thank you.
He never had any plan to quit. May Africa cease to be saddled with this kind of leaders.
Amen.
We need leaders with a plan for the people. And once you've executed your plan, that inner satisfaction that you get,
Come on,
tell you
guys.
that, look, it's about time to leave. What is the point in remaining there forever? But let's work hard to elect young leaders. I'm not disagreeing with Eunice, but we'll find them. We'll find them. They are available. I'll give them. I want to bring up to the podium my colleague, my friend, long-term friend, although these days we hardly relate like before. The radical, former student leader, the man who speaks from his heart. He says the truth, just the way it is. The man who sometimes reminds me of me. It reminds me of me. I'm not as stubborn as he is. You know, if what he did in the palace of the Oni, I would not have done it. That's why I said he sometimes reminds me of me. But our passion for Nigeria is literally the same. We want a better Nigeria. We work together in the news magazine before he set us our reporters. So it's someone that I know very well. I know that if he gets a chance to rule this country, Nigeria will never be the same. But I'm going to balance that up. Because I know that if Fela Kuti gets a chance to rule Nigeria, Nigeria will not be the same. If my sister gets a chance to rule Nigeria,
it's all part of it.
Honestly, Nigeria will be the best place to live. These are those lovely people, and it's been a privilege to be on this stage with them today. And I know that Sowore is all fired up for this. I know what to expect.
Come on, guys. Keep sharing, keep sharing, keep sharing.
Let me just warn in advance that
contrary to what you've been told, that my speech will be the best here today, you'll be disappointed. I am very sick. And I'm sick and tired of this country. But I'll start with this small story. This happened between me and Fela Kuti last week. We went to see Professor Omoyele Sowore, and he called us into his school in Ikeja. And he told us how he met Atiku. I like to name names, right? And he said to Atiku, Atiku is sitting across from him, and he asked Atiku, what is it that you have fresh to offer Nigeria? He said Atiku looked at him and said,
Hi, George.
I'm a good person, I do some nice things. The other time I went to my university when there were refugees running away.
Oh, seriously, I was sick.
I'm asking you, what is it you will do differently if you're president of Nigeria that you couldn't do when you were vice president for 8 years? Atiku couldn't answer. And he then said to him, if you have anything to offer Nigeria, since you've been born, and the thing cannot be transferred to the younger generation of Nigerians, that means that idea is useless. After he left him, Atiku and his entourage, including couldn't take pictures with him. So that event was not known to the public until today that I'm talking to you. Because they had to leave Shoyinka.
I'm better, thank you. Please let's listen to show.
The moment they saw that Shoyinka could not be
better,
fooled,
guys, thank you.
they went to that man in Ota. Yes. Who is always speaking from both sides of his mouth. The dishonest, unpatriotic, inhuman about. And asked him, well, Baba, with all the traditional rulers doing their normal roles, religious leaders, both Muslim and Christians, I said, you have to forgive Atiku, because Atiku is coming back to be president of Nigeria. The usual unpatriotic, inhuman, and wicked Obasanjo invited Atiku to his house and told us that he has not forgiven Atiku. The same Atiku, he claimed that God will not pardon him if he ever recommended to be president of Nigeria. He recommended again to go and destroy Nigeria. And I said somewhere on here last week, I'm not going to speak too much about Africa's history. I teach post-colonial African history in a university in New York for 8 years. There's nothing there. He said to him, I said at that program that if it is true that there is God, and God doesn't punish Obasanjo this time around, so many of us will stop going to church. That's the truth. Because the truth is that wherever God is, He doesn't preside over the affairs of Nigerians anymore. They have redesigned their own God. Their God don't get angry anymore. The God that supervises over Nigeria is always very humble and nice to oppressors. That is not the God we know. And for God to reinvent and reintroduce himself to Nigeria, He has to destroy these characters. I'm telling you. And if He does that, I'll be going back to church. Because I haven't been to church in a long time. I am not a religious person, but I'm a very spiritual person. Yeah. So, what is my experience with Fela? I met Fela in 1992 at the University of Lagos. We invited him to come and play at our show. And he told us, if I get to your school and I cannot do sound check by 7 p.m., I'm not performing. We thought it was a joke. When he got to our school with 27 women dancers, and the place was still under construction, which was a problem of our social secretary. He looked around, went back in his car, and left, and never came back to perform that night. When we saw him later, he said, of course, he has the only contract in the world, which says that after you pay him, is not under any obligation to perform. That's the last one. But he taught me in 1992 something I never knew. I knew, but I had to be taught the hard way. That you have to be in charge of your destiny at all times. And Fela was a man who was in charge of his own destiny. But I went to do my youth war service in Adamawa State in 1995. When I got there, walking to a radio station, Radio Nigeria, the only thing on the wall, the only notice from the Ministry of Information is that under no circumstance should you play Fela Anikulapo Kuti's music in this studio. And that was how it was across Nigeria. Why did I say that? Sometimes we don't celebrate our own. We don't celebrate the contributions that we have made at different times in this country. And that is why I think they don't teach history anymore. Because if we had history in our curriculum, somebody would have told our children that Obasanjo is a bad person. Yes. Somebody would have taught our children that Babangida is a thief. Yes. Somebody would have taught our children and our brothers that Atiku was a custom officer who made it by stealing and robbery. Somebody would have taught our children that Buhari is a useless man.
And lifeless also. And lifeless. Let them know.
We didn't need Donald Trump to tell us that Buhari is lifeless. But here we are in 2008. There is a debate as to who to choose between the worst and the baddest. Yes. And we are all here still romanticizing about what Nigeria should be in the future. Let me tell you, Nigeria has got no future with these guys. It's true. We have no future because people who destroy your past cannot guarantee you any future. But it's important also not to forget that, when people talk about the history of Nigeria, in the way they understand it, they forget to mention that at every point in time, Nigeria always had a problem of leadership. And at every point in time, somebody or a group of people always intervened to take Nigeria out of the doldrums. And number one person who did on his own was Fela Kuti. And that is why this name that he adopted for himself, Anikulapo Kuti, is true to today. The man passed on, but he refused to die in Nigeria. So, I'm not standing in front of you today. I'm telling you a little bit of my history with Fela. Some few years ago, in New York, a friend of mine who I went to call me and said they are looking for someone to act as Fela. There was going to be a show called Fela on Broadway. And I couldn't think of anybody else than myself. So I presented myself. I presented myself to audition to act that role. And it's the reason I will never sing here today. My voice was so bad. Even though my mannerism was exactly like his own, that the guy said, please stop. We'll see you next time. I didn't do it because I thought I could be Fela on Broadway. But there was something he was that I wanted to be. I wanted to be the first black president on the continent of Africa. Because Fela would have been the best black president we have had. But because our country is always rejecting its best and going for its worst, we didn't appreciate Fela when he was alive. Some of you sitting here, probably your parents scolded you before for listening to his music. Some of you were ostracized for going to the shrine. Some of you were rejected at home because they said you are too philosophical. That is the kind of country where I was coming to, where there are people in this country, young people are always intervened. And we should not forget them. Some young people in this country intervene to drive the military out of power. Yes. There's a man who didn't come here today. I heard they bailed out Donald Duke. I would have loved to meet him and just remind him that in 1997 or was there about, he was one of the people who was chanting that Abacha must remain in power. Yes.
When Donald Duke was part of the Abacha must pay people. And when we were younger, in our 20s, we fought to drive the Abachas out of power. Comfort, who was former president of NAS, sitting across from here, female, they fought to drive Abacha out of power. We fought to drive Babangida out of power. In 84 days, we drove Shonekan out of power when he legally cornered the position meant for MKO Abiola. But nobody is studying us in history books. We are studying criminals. We are praising criminals. Even some of our presidential candidates and aspirants have little information about us. And we must say, Father, forgive them. They look down on us. They look down on our sacrifices in this country. They talk down on us because the only Nigeria they know is Nigeria that talks down on people. The only Nigeria they came to experience is the Nigeria that denigrates its young and youth. Someone asked me when I started running, and I've never told this answer before, said, where will you have the experience from the president of Nigeria? You know the usual things. And my answer was very clear. How do I get experience when I've never been allowed to do anything in my life by useless leaders who you claim have experience? It's the same question I was asked when I was applied for scholarship. I think it was one of the oil companies in Nigeria. They came to our area in Evangelist when it was called and said they wanted first-class students. Of course, I went there, knowing my nature. They said, what's your class in the university? I said, I have between second class upper at that time, then I dropped to second class lower in activities in higher aspects. And then he said, but we are looking for first-class students to come for the scholarship. And I told them, if you pollute our water so bad, you pollute our air so well, how do people breathe this air, drink this water, and have first class? It's the same thing for Nigeria. How do you go through so much oppression, denigration, and disgrace by elders such that you are asked for experience? How do you get experience when you've never had a job in your life after graduating from the university? Whichever experience we have to perform it ourselves. Whichever jobs we ever had, we have to create those jobs ourselves. I look at people running Nigeria, there are people who have never even invented a broom in their lives. Some of them cannot tie their shoelaces. Even the umbrella that they use as their logo, some of them cannot carry it over their head when it is raining or the sunshine. So where do you expect us to gain experience from? But the truth is that we have better experience than they do. Yes. We have experience fighting for what is right for 30 years in this country. We have experience and a lot of uncelebrated laurels underneath our belt fighting successive military rulers. We have experience fighting the people Fela called international thieves in this country. You know that we have moved from international thieves into global robbers, GRs. Because what they were stealing when Fela was angry, they no longer steal those things. Those are days of 10% that they collect from contracts. Now, after they are mobilized, they disappear. In fact, in some cases, to get mobilized again, they come and destroy the roads that they were contracted to build. We are living in a country of contractors without builders. And the country you are seeing today, this country, Nigeria, this is the country of their dream. The country without roads, the country without hospitals, the country without schools, is the country of the dreams of the Babangidas of this world. It's the country of the dream of the passengers of this world, or the Abubakars of this world, and the Buharis of this world. And I would say, those who are using overtake, don't overtake. No. We should change and upgrade that to overrun, don't overrun. They have overrun our lives. And the solution, people, is a revolution. That's right. We are not going anywhere without adding a revolutionary favor to this next election. the illusion that these old baggers, as we call them, we hand over power voluntarily to us. We are deceiving ourselves. Any one of us under the illusion that the plastic card that is referred to as the permanent voters card will guarantee you a transfer of power from one generation to the other. You are wasting your time. Because why? That card is already on Alibaba. They will figure out where they cannot control the card and figure out how to withdraw the card from circulation. Most of Lagos now, they have these cards in their possession. And when election day comes, they will be the ones in control of the cards. Of course, a few of you might vote, but your votes will not count because it has been designed to fail from the beginning. And I'm saying to you, if it's one very hard, we might actually win the battle before the war. And what is the battle? It's a battle of minds. There's no question about it. A lot of young people are confused, and you cannot blame them. If all you have had your entire life is being battered and disgraced and denigrated, you will have no self-esteem. And you will not have the ability to even challenge your oppressors. Because most young people in Nigeria don't even know their oppressors. The people who are the oppressors are their role models. That is why you find out that most Nigerian young people are more comfortable with younger musicians who are singing about things that have no relevance to their lives, as opposed to musicians who are singing consciously about the socio-political conditions of our country. So, I can stand here telling you that, well, these people are old, that's the problem. It is true that they are old. That is what they call gerontocracy. But there are also a lot of young people in the system who are morons, and they are practicing what I call morontocracy. And the combination of these young people and the old people is the reason why Nigeria is in the condition it is today. Each time you find a Buhari, you will find a Yaya Bello somewhere. The people that gathered in Abuja for the 2 million man march were all young people from Abuja. The people who largely pushed for third time in this country were young people in their 30s. Right? People who were there saying that Jonathan had no rights to become the president of Nigeria when Jonathan was dying. They were young people. In fact, the person who was Speaker of the House of Reps at that time, Debate Bankole, was perhaps the youngest of our generation. And he did everything to frustrate Jonathan coming to power. You know, my sister just said that, this is the worst government we have. I agree with her. But it's a progression because Nigeria has been in the situation that it is today. The last government is always better than the next. But that don't mean that the worst, in fact, if you ask me which is the worst government, it hasn't come yet. It's coming next year. If we vote for Buhari or Atiku, that would be the worst government that we have. Because both of them have unfinished business with Nigeria. Atiku was not happy that he didn't steal enough when he was in Obasanjo. That he didn't get enough license from university. Maybe he didn't get enough oil blocks for himself. And he didn't probably marry enough wives. So when they return, they are coming with vengeance. Vengeance on our resources, vengeance on our people. Atiku is coming back to create a paradise for thieves. And you can see the people who are excited about it. There are other people who stole, who didn't steal enough last time, or people who are aspiring to become thieves, including young people. It's the same thing for your farms. You take it off because at that time you have nothing at stake. But the truth is this, and I'll say that finally, that it is untrue that there are no young people who can take this country to the next level. A lot of young people are out there who can do fantastic things. But I also agree with people who have said that it's not enough to be young. You must have a young people who is willing to confront this monster. Our moderator here said it that maybe if Nigeria Republic gets it right, we'll be able to destroy the monster of Boko Haram. I disagree with him. the biggest monster that created Boko Haram is the leadership of Nigeria. And the moment Nigeria gets it right, every other country that is suffering right now, we have no option than to get it right. Nigeria is going to become the next sheriff in town. Let me give you an example. Cameroonian activists walked into this country to fight Obia. They were arrested in Abuja, detained and sent back to Cameroon to be killed by Obia, by Buhari's government. If Nigeria were to be a country of conscientious people, those guys will be helping them to put an end to the misery in Cameroon. But the opposite of it is that with what we are doing here, because of the kind of useless leadership we have, Cameroon is going to become another burden to us, the same way Chad became a burden to us. Every time there is a useless African dictator, Nigeria is always part of the people propping them up. Nigeria is part of the leadership that is propping up the Boy Scouts in Togo, who are killing his people. They bring him to Abuja to come and have useless negotiations because Nigeria never wants other countries to progress because Nigeria is not progressing. So this is where we have a problem. But I don't think it's a problem anymore because now you have clear alternatives. Clear alternatives. You have the chance to either go the route of where we are, where we're coming from, or you have the chance to try something brand new. I would say lastly, it is not everything that is looking brand new that is original. Right? So many of the things that say that is glittering is also not gold. But you know, as Fela said in one of his songs, that this uprising will bring out the beat. Thank you very much.
Shebi, who have you deliver 3 bosses to Sowore. Because it's always said that the man with the mic is the one who has got all the powers. I'm now ordering you to give 7 bosses to Sowore now. You will now give 3 bosses to yourselves. You want to play all of them? All of them. Yes. Before we go, you will get a chance to give our people. But right now, we want questions from the audience. You have questions for our panelists. So what I'll do is, I'll take 3 questions on this side, 2 questions on this side, 2 here, and 2 here. So we start with Morayo Afolabi.
My first question, one question. The issue of peace, because Sowore has, I think everybody has told us, yes, everybody saying that the future is in the hands of the young people. Somebody talked about virtual, 27 million Nigerians, opportunity, that is virtual federation that we have. And I'm asking now, we have PVCs. How can we trust the Nigerian youth with that PVC to make the right choices? Because you told all of us to get PVC, and we've gotten the PVC. But how do we change the mindset to ensure that they are responsible with this card and ensure that they vote for the right person and able to see and appreciate the options available? How do we ensure that young people make good use of this card PVC?
Next question.
Good afternoon, speakers. Chuma is my name. I'd like to differ a little bit that this is the worst government. Yes. Yes, the current administration will not be getting everything right. However, I think it's actually a switch from what we have. That's one. I'd like to just say that there was supposed to be a platform where young aspirants will come together and take a one front. But it's a pity that that particular front actually failed. That would have given us enough opportunity to project somebody's aspiration instead of having different persons running on different platforms. As it stands now, if you're not careful, this same old order will go back. Yes, if we are not careful, this same old order will go back. Well, I would like to say very, honorable colleague that this administration is not the worst. Yes, they may not get everything right, but time. I think they want to get it right. Thank you very much.
My name is Tokwe Bakwadide. So I have a direct question linked to the contribution this man just made. And it's directly at you, Sowore, because you've been very, very vocal and attacking people. You're one of those that sort of unpacked the opportunities we would have. Because you were invited and we were looking up to having you work with the other young people. But right now we would have splintered votes. Because you did not bow your ambition to other people that you felt could do, maybe you did not think could do a better job. Is your standing alone going to solve the problem of Nigeria in 2019? By standing alone, would we be better off as young people? Or would it not be better if you had sacrificed your ambition and worked with other people? Kindly answer the question, sir.
Now, take it to the bearded man. The man with the white beard.
Hello, good afternoon. Well, I believe everybody spoke very well, but I think we're doing things a little bit wrong. You see, even if you do become president, who are you going to meet in the various houses? What policies are you going to make when you have senators and you have House of Assembly members that are still of the old brigade? Now the question is, how many of the youth are willing to run for the House of Representatives, the Senate, and all these kind of things? Basically because of one reason, no money. 40% of the people here that have voters cards, when they receive 5,000 or 10,000 naira, they're going to vote the way they're supposed to vote. So let's be realistic. Until the youth are ready to take over the various houses, before we can ever think of, taking over the presidency. That is just my contribution. Thank you.
One more on that side, then we answer the question.
Good afternoon. Actually, I have a condemning position. Actually, the position that the flow of Africa or Nigeria is a national issue. Rather, because we currently have a young person in that position, and yet there will not be a really social change for popular masses and the working people. So I think the problem is the problem of policy, the structural policy, the programs, and the system. So what I think is that we require the unity on the old, the young, the working class, and all the popular masses to have a new political change in the continent. Of course, I agree that the youth should participate politically, should play a very, very important role in the political of the continent. But one thing is that we should have participate in the political education and political actions and movements that will actually change the status quo and bring about new changes for the masses and the working people at large. Whether acceptable.
It's fine.
I'm going to answer the question directed towards me regarding PACT. For those of you who don't have heard about PACT, is the presidential aspirants coming together, which was formed in Abuja a few months ago. I want to make it very clear that I was never part of PACT. And the reason was very clear. I made a suggestion when I arrived at the only meeting I attended that instead of all the aspirants voting for a person, the aspirants should go to their political parties and become candidates so that we can remove a lot of people who are causing distraction. So if we have 3 people and young people can choose from the 3 who they want, it will be better. But they refused. They disagreed with me and I left respectfully and continued my campaign across Nigeria. They went and had their meeting, signed a memorandum of understanding among themselves. The person who won, Fela, was declared the winner. The person who lost refused to accept his loss. It wasn't me, it was Kingsley Morgan. But here is what is different, and I want you guys to be clear about it. When I was coming to this debate, I didn't expect to meet Fela, Eunice, and Obiebo. I was here hoping that I would meet the likes of Buhari and Atiku. That's right. Yes. So it wasn't that the people we are playing against. There's no matter how much time we spend here, they are the people we are up against. And I've said it very clearly, we get to a point where boys will be separated from men, and men will be separated from very old, useless men. And that is the reason I'm projecting myself. Even at the end of the day, if all the young people agree to one candidate, it doesn't guarantee you the chance of victory. Yes. If that one young person is not going to be able to do what is necessary, and I saw it in one of our meetings, in the meeting I had, one of the candidates said that old people ask them to go and choose a young person who they can accept. And the moment they said that, I knew I was not the one. Because I'm not going to be presented to some old people to be accepted. I'm the one accepted candidate. I am here to retire the old guys. If necessary, as we have said, the system will take care of it itself. I mean, institutions. I take care of some of them. So when I start hearing those kind of vibrations from young candidates that they have met with some elders, I started thinking maybe they have met with Obasanjo. And if Obasanjo met with them, I will not be his choice. And I never want to be the choice of the old guys. We want to send them packing in the revolutionary.
Thank you. What is the question?
Yes, any question?
The question is, do I agree that the youth are not ready? You know your thing. The question is, do I agree that the youth, quote unquote, are not ready for political power? And my response is to paraphrase 2 quotes that resonate with this question. One is by a gentleman called Frederick Douglass, who was an abolitionist, he was a former slave, and he says, power seeks nothing without a demand, never has and never will. The other bookend of that is one of my favorite quotes by another political scientist. I mean, those of the Marxist bent in secondary school, university, will remember him. A gentleman by name Franz Fanon. And his quote was, and I'm paraphrasing now, that every generation shall rise out of relative obscurity to find its mission and to fulfill it or to betray it. So the question now becomes between these two bookends about understanding that power sees nothing without a demand, and that every generation, and I'm talking specifically to younger people who form the bulk of Nigeria, for whom the power really lies, if they cannot rise out of where we are now, the relative obscurity of this hegemon that has been created by the class of 66, to find their own mission, to either fulfill it or betray it, they will suffer the consequences of history. And so the challenge again is not us, it's you. I've been saying this, our problems are not technical. We have no business with they throw out, we build this road, we build this road. That is not the issue.
That's not the issue.
Our issues are adaptive, they are mindset issues, they are social adaptation issues. There is you correcting your mindset.
Yeah.
Is it possible for us to have young people who can act on the basis of their own enlightened self-interest? But to get to the point of enlightening, they have to be enlightened themselves. And the status quo, I've been in this political space writing about it for 40 years. Nothing has fundamentally changed. Nothing. I was going back to articles I wrote for Punch in 1982. And I was crying because what am I going to say to you? Those of us who coming of age was Fela in the backdrop of our lives, fighting the military. We understood what we were fighting for. And there was no way to, and there was a particular kind of political naivete that made us absolutely fearless. We did not understand the consequences of what it is we were doing in the threat of the military. What we knew was that we didn't want these people, and we would challenge the system. And some of us died, some of us were missed. And I don't want to go back to that history, but there's been a price to pay. The question is, are young Nigerians willing to pay the price for their own emancipation? That is the question. That is the question. You cannot dodge that issue. There will always be blood on the floor. It is not going to happen. Without, there is no such thing as a free reason. You can slide, talk, evade, be denied about it. What is at stake is not Nigeria per se. Nigeria might disintegrate, and along that with all of us. What is at stake is your own collective future. That is really what the issue is. So the question again, young people, I'm being polemical now and rhetorical, is that are you willing to rise out of relative obscurity to find your mission and to fulfill it, hopefully, or like the rest of us have done, generation over generation, and we betrayed it. It just continues. We have a glimmer, we have a small window now of really beginning to collectively address this issue by changing the narrative. But if you're going to change the narrative, you must create your story. What is your story for the future? How do you define and reshape and define what it is you want for your country? If you're unclear about it, other people will define it for you, as they have done since 1966.
For example, the question.
They don't see us saying that we women don't have voices. Wait, now you get my voice now. That's okay, my lady, she's not. Okay, she said, can we trust the youth to make the right choices? I believe everybody makes the right choices according to their parameters. So the youth making the right choices doesn't mean that everybody likes the same person and everybody votes for that person. You may like Sowore, he may like me. And Sowore is the right choice for you. I am the right choice for me. And you are both correct. So I do believe that youths always make the right choices by their own personal parameters. What we could do is try to direct some of those who are not so fond and those who are not interested in the money to voting for the right people. Now, Sowore, you said that people we are up against the establishment, and I agree. When I set out on this journey, my only aim was to bring together all, absolutely all, the independent new candidates. Bring them under the same platform, knock yourselves out, bring all your followers, all your take back guys, all your building a new nation guys, all your new Nigerian guys, bring all of them into the same platform and knock yourselves out. Somebody has the highest number of followers amongst all of you. Somebody is selling his views better than all of you. Somebody is making sense more than the rest of you. And that person will be able to convince the majority to vote him or her. If we do that, and one of us stands firm, and the rest of us follow him or her, we are taking them down in 2019 and will never come back. That was what I said, and that was what I set out to do from 10th January to 10th June. They refused. Everybody wanted their names on the ballot sheet, including Sowore. They are the unacceptable candidates. Yes, Sowore is for a lot of us the unacceptable candidates. I wouldn't have even voted for him if I were part of the part and was part of it, but for different reasons. Activists have their role, they are useful, they get things done, but they are not the best leaders. For the following people who have another Jonathan, we don't need that. We need believers, decision makers, but who can relate, who can communicate, who can listen to others, who can take advice from everybody, combine all the opinions and arrive at a decision. We do not need war. We do not need guns. We do not need to incite violence and hatred. We need to work together. We need to believe in each person's capacity, capability, and support those who can love. That's my take.
From the beginning, NIP will not be part of a coalition of
you won't take my job.
Greatest Nigerian people. I have a question. My question was to Mrs. I'm aware that she's from NIP, Nigerian Interest Party, and I'm very sure that Nigerian Interest Party is part of the cup of sorrow. And I want to ask the direct question that I'm sure that this was articulated by article to bring all this cup of sorrow together, and I'm pretty sure. I don't have evidence, don't go to me, that something is straight hands. So I'm sure, and again, clearly you are the chairman of the party, and I'm sure that you are the one that signed the FOU to become part of that. So you are part of the people that are trying to take place. And I'm asking the question. My question is, why did she become part of God? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Father.
Excuse me.
First of all, I was so impressed when Fela Kuti was talking about cooperation, collaboration, and civility. Young people have a responsibility to respect themselves. You cannot believe that anybody want to vote for you if your tactics are to attack each other, or to belittle each other, or to be violent, and uncivil in your language.
Wrong.
We demand that you are courteous. We demand that you are collaborating. And you respect yourselves and respect us. Because by respecting us, then we can believe you are ready to lead.
Yes, sir.
By respecting yourselves, we believe you are mature enough to lead. My question to the speakers and to the aspirants is, first of all, why do you want to start from the top? Why are many more young people not vying for local government, councillor, state government, etc.? And secondly, are you going to promise us that you will sustain the effort? Even Buhari didn't win the first time. Are you going to keep on the struggle no matter what happens? Is that a commitment you will make to us to let us know that you are really serious about taking the reins of power in this country? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to start by making a comment directly to you, Chair. The first time, my name is Afia. The first time when this set of questions came from the panel, you attempted to omit the lady on the panel. That's something that happens quite often, and that's something that is wrong.
I had a strategy.
Absolutely. Well, no. There's no strategy. I'm sorry. I'm making the point. That's my yes. I'm making that point to you. There's a lot of time to try and overlook women, but that's by the way. What I wanted to say in terms of the speakers here today, I haven't heard anything about ideology. I haven't heard anything about politics. I've just heard a lot of morality, young people, old people. Power is not about a question of young or old people. Power is about politics. Power is about ideology. I haven't heard that. Power is not about your morality or how nice you are or how wonderful we should be to each other. So that suggests to me that some of the people running do not actually understand what they're actually involved in. The first speaker came up and talked about Tafawa Balewa the first time he went to the US and he was received by, the American state. The American state is a criminal imperialist state that always looks to its interest in other nations. So if a young person does not understand what America is about and that kind of mentality wants to rule Nigeria, I will be very afraid of that kind of person. No politics, no ideology. And even from the rest of the speakers, there's a lot of issues about what's wrong with Nigeria. Nigeria is not Nigeria on its own. Nigeria is a country within Africa. Africa is a continent within world politics. What is your politics? What is your outview of the world? What are your policies? What are the issues? Not just about taking over from this set of criminals that rule us. Because this set of criminals, by the way, the criminality in the Nigerian ruling class did not start today or yesterday. From 1960, we have been ruled by neo-colonial criminals. And it seems to me that some of the young people, some of them who are running today are actually pro-PRO, they are pro-colonial people. People who hold up the United Kingdom, who hold up France. Macron came to visit Nigeria, went to the shrine. Macron is an imperialist criminal. And I don't know if he would have been received by Fela if Fela was alive. We must get our politics and our ideology correct. Thank you very much.
We are moved by the wave of
deciding whether we will stay the course or not. And we can only draw on experience. And our experience is that for 30 years, since I was 18 years old at the University of Lagos, I've stayed the course to today. I fought against military rule. Also with Afion, who just spoke. She was a student leader at the University of Lagos. At that time, her name was Juliet Saudi Cole. Yes, that was her name. That name is no longer in existence today. She has changed her name from the neo-colonial to an authentic African name. I also have in the house another witness who can witness for me even in church or a shrine or in mosque. Barrister Fela Anikulapo, who was my lawyer, who has been my lawyer for 30 years. He's not walking through the house. So it's not about staying the course. It's about the fact that we have been made resilient, unbowed, and undaunted for 29 years plus. It will be 30 years next year. And I said to people, if I were to be in the army, I would probably be a field marshal by now. So there's nothing to worry about. There's pedigree, there's history now. What you should question are those who don't have enough understanding of the problems. And for Afion, my great teacher, when I was a young student at the University of Lagos, the response we had today is a symbolic response to what you find also on the high table. We are discussing contemporary Nigeria. Sometimes I do not go the ideological route so as not to confuse too many people. But there's no doubt that we are also ideologically grounded. And you know that when nobody knew that the world, if this country were to be fair to us, there will be no argument about the young person who can lead us to victory and the future. And I'll say this before you collect the microphone from me. I'm not bragging. I am saying to young people who have stepped out of the shadows. If you are young or you have ideas and you can rule this country, don't stay in the shadows. Because when you do so, you allow charlatans and non-entities to rule your country. So that is my position. Last question about why we want to start from the top. The fact is this, man. Who at the top is better than us today? If anybody wants to be a councillor, we have a political party. You can join and be a councillor. If you want to be a senator, we have African Action Congress. You can join and become a senator. I, Omoyele Sowore, qualified and even more qualified than some of these people that we are talking about today. I'm stepping out to be president of Nigeria because I know I can run this as far better than the starting at the top, but I didn't come from the top. I came from the bottom 30 years ago, and now we must rise to the top of our time.
Should I give it to her?
Guy, you're asking me why the NIP signed the CUPP coalition? It's very simple. All of us who actually believe that on their own they are going to win the presidency of the Federal Republic of Nigeria are dreamers. Can never happen. You cannot on your own run for the presidency of any country in a democratic system and win. It's not happening. Because take it back, guys, they're not the only ones here. They're not who actually want to hear what I'm saying. So calm down. So when we tried for 6 months to get all the non-independent candidates to come together to form the grand coalition that Omoyele Sowore was campaigning about, we did everything of Nigeria, but if you try to do it alone, you will not succeed. And I thought, wow, why not give it a chance? Since I know that alone I cannot win. That's the reason I joined the CUPP, and I have never regretted it. Why start from the top? Mommy, all of us were not built to start from the bottom. Some of us are designed to start from the top. And I personally prepared myself to start from the top. I founded the NIP, National Interest Party. I started from the top. I am the one that raised absolutely every money I needed to study at home, abroad, my family. I always start from the top. And even though I was ready to create an enabling environment for one of those young, strong Nigerians to start from the top, I was happy to postpone my starting from the top to another time. But now that they refuse to start from the top with me, I'm out there starting from the top because that's not where I know where to start from. I am not one of those that start from the bottom, and I did not develop myself to start from the bottom. Finally, am I going to sustain this? 100% yes. I will be the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Whatever happens in 2019, I will learn from it, and you see me in 2023. If I'm not president in 2023, I will learn from 2023. I'll get ready, I'll prepare better. And if you see me in 2027, I am not stopping.
It's getting really interesting. Hold on, put those hands down. Put those hands down. It's getting really interesting. But as young people, we must not lose our heads. We must be simple, we must not lose our heads. So, I want questions from you. I don't want you talking about my panelists, attacking my panelists. If that is what you want to do, then I will close this session. Then we go. I don't want you to insult any of the panelists or even me. That's what I think. Okay, what we'll do now, we'll close with this rule. I want two questions from this side. Baba, old men first. Old men first, Baba. And now you ask your question.
Thank you very much. I have been listening to all of us. I first of all have to pay honor to Fela. Fela Kuti was a very great man. He's still living in our minds. He would have been 80 now. I am only 76, but I'm still strong. So it is not by age. I have been teaching. Yes, some of the students, some of those whom I taught have worked in government. But that is not the issue now. I have heard all about age, old age. There are young people who are armed robbers. And there are old men who are also armed robbers. So, like the lady there spoke, Eunice, it's not necessarily about age. But like Ashton said, you have to think about what is in the brain. You may have a PhD. What is the meaning of that PhD? What do you have? They would have formed some nonsense things about you. They would have told you to insult your parents and give you degree. You have your master's and PhD on that. So, what is the content? The ideological content of the education. Now, if you look out there, you will see one is that Africa is still not free. It is still a colonial thing, although another good name for it is neo-colonialism. That is what Africa is, including Nigeria. We are not free people. Young men and women, we are not informed. There was a coup of Fukuma Kaduna Zone. The aim of that coup and the establishment of the aim of that coup was eventually to make Awolowo the president. This didn't and so we are here hating each other. So, we are here hating each other, playing politics. That is the message. If you have
please stand up, because people are going. I need to write this session.
So, please, my own suggestion is for those who are going to work for the president, you need to mobilize. You need to organize. And you have to organize Thank you.
Hi, sir.
Nice job now.
Nothing pass.
Hi.
City.
Revolution are always determined by revolution. Our revolution wants to bring this country up and restore it to glory, not past glory, because there's never glory in the past. And it's up to the oppressor to determine the nature and character of the revolution.
Okay.
That's our position.
So whatever front they bring up is whatever front you're
because we want to be free, they don't want us to be free. So there has to be some kind of confrontation. So it's up to them to not allow a major confrontation. Clear the road for Jaga Jaga as Fela would say. Or for them to stand in the way of that freedom, and then we have to fight through that.
You didn't go sabotage, right?
Wait. Just please. Sorry about that. Just one.
AAC!